our speaker for tonight, a lady called Lynn, Cowie, McAlister, who is just an absolute delight as you'll get to see her personality. She's here she comes, and has just been wonderful to work with. And not only has she helped the hockey mentors and the mentees, but has been a great contributor to the mentor discussions around how she's been able to become an international level official. And I'm not going to say too much more than that. She's got a wonderful story to tell, and we'll yeah, there's no pressure at all. Just come and be yourself.
Yeah. Thank you. The first thing I saw when I got here tonight was stairs, and I went, oh, here we go, and they're filming, so I might have made us some money on Funniest Home Bloopers. But anyway, I'm just going to grab some water, and I suppose I'll start with a story, but I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land of which we meet, their elders past, present and emerging, and to recognise that this is Aboriginal land, always has been and always will be. I'd also like to acknowledge one of my amazing umpiring colleagues who's in the room with us, Julie Ashton-Lucy, sitting down the back row. And Julie's going to be part of my story tonight. Amazing three-time Olympic umpire, resides on the Gold Coast. And so Julie, wave your hand. Thanks. There she is. So outside tonight, she's someone that you need to hear stories from because she's an amazing woman. I suppose I really want to change my whole talk now because that data was so engaging, and the women's stuff, I'm passionate about women in sport, so it's really good that I'm on a panel with all boys tonight. Girls, we're going to nail this, all right? But I'm really passionate about women in sport, and I think some of the stuff that I suppose I want to share with you tonight, and I do want to change it because it scared me that 53% of women are looking, that really, really worried me when they were the biggest responders. It's just thrown my whole talk now. But anyway, okay. When I agreed to participate, Ash actually rang me while we were on holidays and said, oh, Lynn, we're running this forum on the Gold Coast. Would you like to be part of it? And I said, yeah, absolutely, no worries. And then about a week and a half ago, I got this email saying, keynote speaker, Lynn, Cowie, McAlister. And I went, Ash, I don't know if I actually signed up to that. What does that mean? And he came back with, don't stress, I'll email you. And I went, oh, awesome. And he actually ended up flicking me through some questions that he'd like me to answer tonight. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about my journey and background. It's really funny because looking at those stats, I suppose I fit a lot of them. And that was quite surprising to me. And I suppose tonight I'm preaching to the converted because you're all here because you're passionate about the officiating space and how we can engage better with, I suppose I've got a passion about women and juniors coming through. But the first question that Ash asked me to answer was where I came from. I'm actually a Gold Coast girl. I started on the Gold Coast. My background's hockey, and I wasn't from a hockey family. I was out on the oval playing cricket when I was in Year 6, and my classroom teacher, Mr. Sess Edwards, who was the hockey coach, said, "You've got pretty good hand-eye coordination there, Lynn." And I said, "Oh, thanks, sir." And he said, "Do you want to play hockey because I'm the coach?" And I went, "Yes," because he was an amazing teacher, and I thought, why not? The next year, I made my first representative hockey team and kind of progressed through a playing mode. And I think this is where we get this diverse range of opinions within our community and the wider community around our officiating space. On Tuesday, I was doing some fitness training with a friend of mine, Jenny, highly educated woman, amazing teacher, has 2 daughters who play high-level sport. And I was talking to her, I said, I'm really excited, hockey's back on and I've got my first game this coming Saturday. I'm still umpiring. And she goes, do you actually like umpiring? And I said, yeah, I do, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. And she said to me, I just always thought like umpires and referees were people who were probably pretty crap at their sport and decided that they try and keep involved in another way. And I said, I think you need to sit down and we're going to have a little chat. And 20 minutes later, she said, oh, crap, I had no idea. And I suppose that really blew my mind in a way because you have an intelligent woman who's got 2 young girls playing high-level sport who still had this negative perception about officials. And in this day and age, despite all the work we've done about engaging our communities around officials, we're still facing that. And that was a little bit concerning for me. So I think we've got a lot more work to do. But back to Mr. Edwards and I suppose me playing hockey. Therefore I wasn't from a traditional hockey playing family, made my first representative team at 12, kind of progressed through and kept playing representative schoolgirls, representative for the Gold Coast, and then at around 16 I was playing for Labrador, so that's where the actual com game setup is, back in the day. And it was a Friday night, and there was a secondary schoolboys competition. And pretty no-brainer for a 16-year-old girl. Do you want to learn how to umpire hockey while you're umpiring the 16-year-old boys? Yes, I do. Thank you very much. So Labrador Hockey actually ran that program. And I went down, and it was a bit of pocket money. They paid you $5 a game. But the best thing for me was that I had a person behind me teaching me the rules. I had a context around what I was doing, but I'd never actually umpired a game of hockey. And I had to learn very, very quickly that 16 and 17-year-old boys weren't going to be nice out there, and I had to learn how to manage myself. And I learnt very, very quickly that on Friday nights when it's really, really cold and you have to send the boys off, because this is the olden days, many years ago, and they had to go and sit behind the net, the goal box, and I wasn't going to let their coaches take their jackets to them. So they could sit there for 5 or 10 minutes in the freezing cold at Labrador on a Friday night with the mist running through. They learnt very quickly they didn't question me a lot if they wanted to stay warm. So that's, I suppose, how I started my assertiveness on the hockey field with some young men, and that was always good fun. My first, I suppose, official appointment was exactly the same thing. I'd stepped out of under-15 representative hockey. My sister was still playing in under-15 representative hockey. And Gold Coast said, well, Lynn, you're going to be there watching her. Can you just be our umpire? And I said, yep, sure, because I'd been doing this program through Labrador on the Friday night. And it was the first taste that I'd had of working as a team of umpires. I'd always played. I was always part of the team. I'd captain my representative sides. But I'd never been part of an officiating team, and I'd never experienced that. And it was a really positive experience for me. And I was appointed to the Div 2 Grand Final under-15s my first time round. And that's where I was identified as someone who showed promise. And we kind of went from there. I didn't know about a pathway at that point in time. I didn't know that you could progress to international standards. I didn't know any of that stuff. I just did it because I was asked, because I enjoyed my sport and I wanted to contribute. And my sister was playing, so I was there anyway and I enjoyed it. And we kind of went from there. The Gold Coast had a really, really wonderful program at that point in time to try and promote younger umpires. And looking back, I had this amazing group of women around me. And, as a 16-year-old girl, you don't probably recognise that until you reflect back. But I was surrounded by this amazing, strong group of women who wanted a young female umpire to succeed. And they pushed. And it was really cool. And I suppose, so Mrs. Salan, I'm always going to forget someone. Mrs. Black, I still can't call them by their first names, isn't that, anyway. Mrs. Fogan and Jeanette Snedden, I can call Jeanette by her first name. They were the 4 women on the Gold Coast at that point in time who really, really drove me and pushed me to become an umpire. I still played representative hockey until my mid-20s, but I also umpired at the same time. And that was interesting because I had a perception that I knew as a player when I had a good umpire, and it made the game so much better. And I wanted to be that umpire because I didn't want to let the players down. And I suppose that was a bit of my ethos the whole way through my umpiring career. I didn't want to let the players down. I wanted them to be able to achieve what they'd set out to achieve and be the best that they could be. And if I could do that, then I'd kind of met my goal. I didn't like being in the spotlight. It wasn't who I was. I just wanted to help them achieve what they wanted to achieve. But one of the questions that Ash asked me to answer also were some of the challenges that I face as a junior official. And it's stock standard stuff, and I think everyone in the room's probably heard these stories before. I face attitudes from parents, and some of the things that they would say to you as a 16 and 17-year-old girl was pretty full on. I remember one coach actually said, and her team was winning 8-0 at the time, "Don't punish my team for your inability." And you did want to turn around and you wanted to go, but you couldn't. You couldn't do that. And you had to walk away. And, there were times I kind of went, oh, Jesus, do I really want to do this? But you came back because you wanted to do well. And it taught me I've become very assertive in my mature years. And I think a lot of this started when I was 16 and 17. I think another thing that happened on the Gold Coast at least was that I was also invited to umpire men's hockey. And That's an interesting space. A lot of our elite athletes, and I call my officials athletes these days, do umpire men's games because it is a very quick game, and for fitness-wise, you've got to be on, which is great. But it was back in the day, and I still remember I was umpiring the preliminary men's final because my team had already made the grand final for the following week. I was playing Div 1 at that point in time. I was about 18 or 19 years of age, and I umpired the men's knockout final. And I made a decision where I disallowed a goal. And I'm not going to go into the reasons because we could be here all night debating. Are there any hockey people here? Are any hockey? Oh, I don't have my tribe. Right, Jules, you're it. Right, yeah, thank you. Okay, so basically I made a decision. I disallowed a goal. One of the teams wasn't very happy about that, obviously. But they got on with it. But needless to say, that team actually lost. So you can imagine at the end of the game, being 16 and 17 and being surrounded by grown men who said, that was a shit decision. And I said, well, that's your opinion, you know. I said, I'm not changing it, and we're not going to go back and replay the game. So I exited the field quite quickly, signed the card, and tried to leave because I knew it was going to be a bit contentious, and you don't want to be around that. I was young, you know, I'd just gotten my driver's licence. On the way out, a club member from the team that had lost bailed me up, and he'd been drinking, and he got on my face, and he did the finger. That decision was, blah, blah, blah. The expletives were great. I didn't appreciate being backed into a wall, because that was what was behind me, and I couldn't get away from him because he got in my face. And I was just fortunate that there were two other men walking by who saw it and grabbed him and took him away. And I got in my car and went home, and I was really upset about that because that was physical and violent intimidation towards a woman, and that's not okay in any situation. Given our current stats about domestic violence in this country and the fact that Queensland leads it, that is not cool. Hence another reason I've become very assertive. I went home, I probably cried for a good 2 or 3 hours, and then rang the president of the Gold Coast Hockey Association and reported that because I felt it needed to be reported. They went to the club and they wanted to seek out what had happened. Of course, we hadn't had too many witnesses, and the club came back with, oh, look, you know, he'd been drinking, probably wasn't okay, but, you know, he's a good club man. So the next year when I was approached to umpire men's hockey, I said, well, you'll just need to respect my decision of no. And to be honest, I probably didn't umpire much men's hockey after that because I found it not okay. And I didn't feel at that point in time I'd been supported appropriately. And that could have changed my career. You know, that could have changed whether I'd continued or not. But it was at that point in time that I came into contact with some amazing coaches and, in a way, mentors. And it was those people who pulled me through those dark times. And I'll start with some of the coaches because they stand out in my mind as people who said, you can do well, and tried to develop that skill set within you. And two coaches who started out were Heather Scraggs and Michelle Arnold, both Olympic umpires in their own rights. Jules at the back really, really helped me, and Lynn Hill, who's actually one of my closest friends in the world, and also Jan Hadfield. They coached me. But I think it's really important that we recognise the difference between a coach and a mentor. Mentors give you the time where you can vent and identify, well, you know, this is one of my areas of weakness. I'm an overthinker. I didn't sleep last night really well because I was really nervous about this talk tonight. So I'm an overthinker and I know that, you know, and my husband who's sitting down the back next to Julie will verify that. I overthink things because he just says, you need to stop, just shut up. And that's, you know, it's okay. I do that every now and then, not often. But it was my mentors in Julie, Lynn Hill, and ultimately Margaret Hunnable from the UK who gave me the skill set to really progress my umpiring career and to gain confidence in myself as not only official but as a person. And I think that's only something a good mentor can do. And you have to have confidence in those people that what you say in the room will stay in the room, because sometimes you're going to say things that others could quite, you know, find a bit offensive, but you need to have that confidence. And I suppose that's why I'm so passionate about the mentoring program and involving young women, is that they've got to have a safe space to be able to talk to us, because we just saw the stats. They're going to leave our sports if we don't. And I think that's something that we as communities in sport can engage much better around, the differentiation between coaching and mentoring. And I'm quite Ash has got you probably could talk about that for the next year, really, couldn't you? But we won't do that. All right. Ash, I suppose, then asked me to talk about my journey. In Queensland, we've got this really stringent system. We produce awesome officials up here, if I do say so myself. We've got a program in Queensland where we have to progress through badges through a variety of tournaments and levels. Then you have to be talent ID'd, and then Queensland might put your name forward to attend a national championship. Once you get through a national championship, in my day it was 18s, then 21s, then our Australian Hockey League. I went to 18s and performed well, went to 21s, got my then Australian badge, and then you had to get your name put forward to our National League. Now, our National League, I suppose because there's no hockey people in the room, I'll compare it to the National Rugby League competition. You're the top 12 in the country to get to that tournament. At 27 years of age, after a number of years of taking unpaid leave to go to tournaments, to paying for your food, to getting small allowances, I finally got there. So the expenditure, which Ash was talking about, is still there. And that can be a blocker for a lot of people, especially our young people coming through university and the like. You know, they haven't got the cash to be able to take that time off. And I know that we're experiencing that within hockey, and that's another talk, because I'm talking about myself and I hate it, but that's what I've been told to do, so I apologise. All right, so back to AHL. I cracked AHL at 27, the year 2000, when we had the Sydney Olympics. So I walked in to the most amazing, dynamic team of women that I had ever experienced. I was the only person who was not internationally recognised on that panel, which was intimidating like you have no idea. Because you didn't want to let the team down, but you didn't want to do badly because it was just going to go horribly wrong. Fortunately, I did well at AHL, and over 2001 and 2002, I was appointed to a variety of tournaments whereby I received my international hockey badge. And I can tell some crazy stories, but I don't think we've got too much time to do that tonight, maybe over dinner out or some food outside later on. But some of my highlights were an international series between New Zealand and Australia. Australia, obviously, we'd just taken out the gold medal at the Olympics, so the Australian team was red hot awesome. And Alison Annan, who in my opinion is probably the best player that Australia's ever produced, was still playing for Australia at that time, and it was actually her last tournament that she did play for Australia, and I was honoured to umpire her last game. It was an amazing tournament, and but you're thrown into the deep end in a way too, because I'd kind of come through the Australian system where you've got this amazing group of people around you. There was no television or video referrals or anything back then, but I went into New Zealand and we were live television. So one of my stories that I learned really quickly, we were mic'd up, but it was back in the day when you couldn't turn the sound off. So when I get nervous, I have to go to the bathroom. So I had to apologise to the whole media team at halftime. Sorry, team, can't turn this off and I need to go to the bathroom. So they worked out that I got nervous a little bit because I could hear everything that you're doing. And another experience that I had was in the middle of a game, one of the sound guys put the sound boom down, and we have a circle for hockey, and that's where you can shoot. That's where the dynamic goal scoring stuff plays. And they dropped it so low into the circle that it was nearly touching the players' heads. And I just remember Alison Annan going, "Tell them to get it up!" And I'm like, "Get the sound boom up," while I'm trying to manage players and everything else. But, you know, it's experiences like those that make you a stronger person in some ways. Or it can actually end your career if you don't manage those situations well. So you've got to do everything with a laugh. In 2003, I was fortunate enough to be appointed to the pre-Olympic tour. 2004 was Athens Olympics. And I got to go to Spain and umpire a friendly test match between Australia, Spain and China. You learn very quickly that there are never any friendly test matches in any context, and you can't go out there thinking that they're going to be friendly. So I actually had to give my first red card in that tournament, and it made me feel physically ill. A red card in hockey is you're off for the rest of the game, and it's very serious. what had actually happened is two players, a Chinese and Australian girl, had gone down together. I was watching because I knew the Australian player and she was a little bit fiery, so I was thinking, oh, here we go. But what actually happened was they both, as the players got up, the Australian girl went to run away and the Chinese player actually picked her stick up and hit the Australian player. And as a young woman who saw that, I'm thinking, holy crap, that's a red card. And I blew time and I gave the red card. After the game, I was surrounded by the Chinese who said, no, the Australian girl hit her first, the Australian girl hit her first. And I said, please watch your video. Please watch your video. You'll find that I'm right. And you're thinking in the back of my mind, holy crap, I hope I did not miss that. Yeah. Anyway, I watched the Australian video that night and I hadn't missed it. It was fine. And the next day, the Chinese coach came and spoke to me and he said, yes, you were right. She will not play for the rest of the tournament. But that was pretty full on. The same time, the next day I umpired Australia-Spain, and the Spanish team, I can't stand behind this, sorry, I'm a mover. The Spanish team actually had a new coach and he was Dutch. And so there was one decision that he didn't agree with, and he felt he had the right to walk onto the field and get in my face and yell at me. Now, because it was friendly, we didn't have a technical group to protect us as umpires. And so I had to deal with him, stop the game, deal with him and tell him that if he didn't get off the field, I was going to card his captain. I was 29 and it was my first time in Europe, which is where our hockey, I suppose, epicentre is. And I found that really scary. But we did it. And I think I put that down to the good coaching that I'd had in Australia to give me the confidence to be able to do that. I then went up to Holland and there was a Four Nations tournament for women that was held in conjunction with the Men's Champions Trophy. Men's Champions Trophy is one of the biggest tournaments in the world and it was in Holland. And I don't know, like, I walked into Holland and they've got, you know, like our NRL and AFL, like there's ads like that for hockey. And that just blew my mind. For women's hockey, which was even more astounding. And you're treated so well. You know, like you kind of come from this space in Australia where, you know, you've got men who are prepared to go you and tell you this and da-da-da, to over there where you're just so respected and involved in the sport and people want to hear. I had a kid ask for my autograph. And I was just like, oh no, I'm the umpire. And they go, yeah! And I went, holy mackerel! You know, and you're signing it and you're, oh, okay. But it was an amazing experience. And my first big international game was between Germany and Holland. Yeah, thank you for that reaction because that's how I was too. 15,000 people in the crowd. I walked out and I've got goosebumps right now because it was the most amazing experience I think I've ever had in my life. I learnt very quickly I had to blow really loudly with my whistle because they all just went off their chops and you couldn't hear each other anyway. But it was an amazing experience and I got a good report, which was great. And the report at the bottom said Lynn will have an amazing international career as an umpire. And that was really wonderful. I came back to Australia that year, pretty happy with that. And at the end of 2003, the Women's Champions Trophy was actually held in Sydney. And what if the Federation of International Hockey determined to do was to fly the top 10 female and the top 10 male up-and-coming identified officials to Australia to undertake a training program in consultation with the Champions Trophy. And I was identified as part of that group. That's where my headspace, where I overthink things, I think, oh, well, it's probably in Australia, so they're going to have an Australian official, so maybe and so the headspace stuff started talking. And what actually happened was FIH said, no, we've identified the top 10 up-and-coming women and the top 10 up-and-coming men, suck it up, you're going. And that was really wonderful for me because it gave me a little bit of confidence that I was on the right path. 2004 came and I fell pregnant. And I had my beautiful boy at the end of October. But with that, and it's really interesting because this is where I think we need to do a lot more work as women. We need to do a lot more work as women around this space. Because 2004 I fell pregnant. I fed my beautiful boy until the end of 2005. Mid-2006 I fell pregnant with my second child. Had her in March 2007, fed her until the end of 2008. So effectively, over that period of time, I had 5.5 years off internationally. And it was really interesting because as I was coming through, the Federation of International Hockey wanted experience. They wanted these amazing, dynamic women who had this great experience. And when I re-emerged out of the darkness and under Julie's guidance got back involved in the international space, we had a change of the guard at FIH who said, no, it's youth. And I went, oh, timing, Lynn, great job. But I managed to come back to some extent, and in 2009, 10 and 11, I was really fortunate and blessed to umpire at several Four Nation tournaments, one being in South Africa. And I want to share this story because I think it's really important for women and for people in the room to understand the space. It was my first tournament back after 5.5 years off having raised my children, and that was a choice. That was a choice. You know, some of my closest friends who have gone on to Olympics and whatnot as officials have made some hard choices around their children. And to this day, we still talk about that. I made my choices and I accept what happened around that, and I wouldn't change a thing. But after 30 hours of travel, and I don't sleep when I travel, I got off the plane and we had to go to a dinner. And Clive McMurray from South Africa Hockey, who was also very high up in the Federation of Hockey, sat with me at dinner that night, and he turned to me and the first question he said was not, Lynn, how are you? It was, Lynn, why did you choose to take the last 5.5 years off? And I thought, I have to be really, politics and sport, I have to be really careful how I respond to this. But I was tired. And I said to Clive, well, I find it interesting that a male's asking me that question because you've never had to make that choice. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, you're right. And we had this wonderful, amazing open dialogue. That could have gone really badly. But it didn't. It went well. 2009, 10 and 11, I got to umpire the Four Nations in Durban, Four Nations in Essen, Germany, Chinese National Games, and in 2012 I was rewarded with the Olympic qualifier in New Delhi, 2012. That was a highlight of my career, and it was something that I will never forget because it was an absolutely amazing tournament. In 2013, at 39, I was named in the Road to Rio group. We have these groups at international level that are identified as possibles for the following Olympics. So we want as many Australians in the road to wherever we're going as possible. But at 39, I was pretty happy to be named in that group because the changing of the guard was happening. And over 2013, 14 and 15, I got to umpire the World Series semi-finals in Rotterdam. I got to umpire a number of test series, Argentina versus Australia. I got to umpire the Oceania Cup Grand Final. And then I missed the Rio Olympics. I didn't get appointed. And I suppose for me to come back from where I'd come back and to even be considered part of the top, 30 officials in the world at that time, I was pretty happy. Yeah, I was gutted that I missed out. But at the same time, I discredit my journey. And I was really, really fortunate because in 2016, I actually called it quits and I said, I'm going to retire from international hockey umpiring. And I was blessed because there was a Chinese test series in Australia and I got to umpire my final international match in Perth with one of my best mates, Melissa Trivick, in front of my family and in front of an Australian home crowd. And that was a great way for me to choose how I went out. And I think that's a powerful thing for officials too, is that they need to be given the pathway to choose when and how that happens. And I think it's different journeys for different people. But I've gotten to travel the world. I've made some of the most amazing friends that you could ever come across. And I've been involved in some really high-level tournaments. So that was awesome. Where am I now? Next question, and we're nearly finished because I can see people are getting titchy and you need food, and I hate standing between people and food. That's the other thing. Where am I now? Well, I'm still umpiring. I am still umpiring. Brisbane Women's Hockey Association have Hockey Zone television. Don't Google this because it's quite embarrassing. But they were doing their analysis of the first round in Brisbane, and they were doing their breakdown of who was going to win, and they did a bit on the officials, which is really great, really positive, the female officials. And this horrible photo of me popped up, and the commentator goes, Lynn, Cowie, McAlister. She's been around for yonks. What? And I actually got on and I went, is that code for old? And one of the young women that I'm currently mentoring went, no, it means experienced. What? Anyway, I had a good laugh about that. That was Tuesday night. Had a good laugh about that. So I'm still umpiring. I think it's really, really important that as somebody who has had experiences at international levels and national levels that we give back to our sport, because it's important for our up-and-coming officials to have those people to be on the field with them. I am uber protective of our younger umpires, especially our women, I suppose because of some of the experiences that I've shared here tonight. So they actually love umpiring with me because they know that they're going to get protected, and that allows them to focus on what they should be out there to do, which is to umpire. I'm mentoring. I went through the AIS mentoring program, and I can't recommend that highly enough. If you are ever given the opportunity, because we need to bring that back, don't we, Ash? If you are ever given the opportunity to participate in that program as a mentor, take it. Take it with open arms, because it gives you the most dynamic skill set and the ability to address issues in our sports at a high level. And only the AIS, in consultation with all of our national associations, can fix that. So get on it. It's amazing. And you get to mentor across sports. I got to mentor some of the young rugby league umpires, which was really interesting because they come from different perspectives. But I think the lovely thing about it was that they want to learn from you. They want to learn from you. And if we can give that back, then hopefully we can keep them. And I think that's really empowering as well. I support country associations. I'm also sitting on the HA Officiating Committee, and I've been recognised by the Federation of International Hockey as a promising umpires manager. So my journey continues now, just in a different way. And again, I want to give back to my sport. Because if I hadn't had people like Julie and like Lynn Hill and like many others, I would never have gone to the places that I got to go. And I need to be there to support those who can get there. If I had my time over again, what would I do differently? And I think this is something we could all probably reflect on. It's a difficult question, and it brought up some pretty interesting thoughts in my head. But firstly, the first thing I would do is stop comparing myself to others. I think one of my biggest downfalls was that I compared myself to some amazing women, and I felt inadequate at times, which did impact upon whether I believed I could actually be in that elite space. One of the messages that I try to give to some of those young women coming through is don't compare yourself to anyone else but yourself. If you can go out there and you umpire a game and you're happy with your game, that's all you can control. Control what you can control, let go of everything else. That was one thing that I learnt too late in my umpiring career, and I think that's a conversation that we probably need to have with some of our young officials, because they do look up to people in your local sporting associations, and they sometimes can feel a little bit threatened by that. So I think that's a really important message. Better learn to accept that I could control what I can control and let go of what I couldn't. To take that pressure off yourself, I think it's really, really important. The other thing that I would do differently is probably just enjoy it a bit more. Sit back and actually go, holy mackerel, I'm in New Delhi, or I'm in Essen, or I'm in Holland, and just go, what an amazing opportunity experience, rather than going, I have to umpire well here because I have to get a good report so that I can progress to the next level. And I think sometimes if I'd taken that step back and just breathed, you know, it probably would have helped me in that official space. So I think that's really good. And the other thing that I probably do differently is access a sports psychologist a lot earlier. For a variety of reasons, some of them personal, some of them not. But I think one of the biggest things that I found difficult I can't speak on behalf of men, but I suppose I can speak on behalf of women, because a lot of the women that I mentor and a lot of the umpires that I've umpired with in my time found it really difficult to compartmentalise. So your family, your professional life, your hockey, to actually be able to separate them so that it all didn't intertwine and become overwhelming. And I found that sometimes, like poor Scott in the lead up to a tournament, he knew he was just going to cop a gobful from me because I'd get so worked up about going because I had to organise routines and care and this for the kids, and then, I was a bad mother because I was leaving my children and a bad partner. And so, you know, like if I'd actually, whereas towards the end of my career, I'm like, oh, holiday, see you in 2 weeks, I'm out. And I think I enjoyed my hockey more. So, and that's when I was talking to someone about being able to compartmentalise. So I think that's really, really important for our officials. One other strategy that I learned is that, through my sports psychologist, is that when I entered the field, I tapped the door, I'm leaving everything else here, and I'm just going to go out there and enjoy it. And I wish I'd done that at 16, you know? Some strategies around things like that. How can we better help our officials? I think Ash has addressed a lot of that, but I think what we need to do is ensure that we have transparency and equity in our processes. A lot of the young ones say to me, I don't understand how that appointment happened. I don't understand why they got that game. I don't understand. And I think if you can have the transparent and equity in process, they mightn't agree with the ultimate decision, but at least they can understand the process that you got to get there. And I think that's a really important lesson. And that's something that I know at Hockey Australia we have to work on. I think we have to better clearly articulate and communicate pathways, and that different pathways for different people are good and okay. We cannot undervalue somebody who is going to be a Div 1 umpire in our local association, and we know that they're probably not going to go any further because they do a top job and they bring our players through. Don't undervalue that. And I think we do. I really think we do, because, they're not going to go to an 18s, they're not going to go to a Nationals, they're not going to go to the next level. Don't undervalue that, because that's how we lose people. So I think we need to better look at that. I think from a top level, we need to better own our space internationally. I know within hockey, and I'm only speaking on behalf of hockey, we have let the Oceania region be dominated by New Zealand rather than Australia. So a lot of decisions are being made about our sport that we have no ownership of in that space, and we've just got to go along with it. And I think some of those decisions are disadvantageous to our umpires. So I think we really need to step back into that space and own it, and I'm passionate about that. So watch this space. I think we better, I think there's all those things, and as I said, I think we could also give better access to our up-and-comings. And Ash identified it as part of his stats, to sports psychologists, to trainers, to high-performance staff and players. If we want people to progress, the players are the bread and butter. They're getting the money, not us. But it doesn't mean that the elite sports trainers couldn't help our up-and-comings with, a training program. Or with accessing some sporting facilities at no cost. There's little things that we can do that would draw people in so that they feel valued. Because the reality of the matter is, as the data identified, I think it's awesome when I walk a film and someone goes, "Hey, thanks for umpiring, Lynn," and you go, "Holy mackerel, they've thanked me." Just those little recognitions can mean a huge deal to our officials. And I also think we need to be very, very aware that there are some kids who show absolute promise as officials, but because of financial disadvantage, may not progress, and we've got to look at how we can best support those kids to ensure that they continue, because they're at risk, and I think we can do a better job around that. So, to sum up, I've had an amazing career. I've made some of the best friends in my life. I've been exposed to some of the best players in the world and being able to manage them. And I think that diversity of experience has impacted upon me in so many other areas of my life, as a mum, as a woman, as a small business owner, as a union official. I am passionate about ensuring the future of officiating in our country for hockey. I want to be an active part of that space, and that comes from everything that I've just discussed. So if you in here are part of your Community Pathways program, if you in here can inspire some of those young 10 to 14-year-olds, how exciting is that, who want to be part of that space, think about what you can give them in one of the most amazing life experiences that they will ever have. And I'd like to commend you for the work. I'm going to give you a thank you. I want to commend you for the work that you do in your sport, and for the time that you give, and for some of those junior umpires who are going to go on and thrive and succeed because of you in this room. So thank you very much for your time.